Hey there, and welcome to Crazy Pepper, the channel where drama sizzles and revenge burns hotter than ever. If you love jaw dropping twists, bold characters, and stories that keep you guessing till the end, you're in the right place. Subscribe and dive into gripping tales of betrayal, karma, and ultimate payback. Get ready for unforgettable moments and satisfying endings, only on Crazy Pepper. Hit that bell and let the drama begin. The champagne flute felt heavier in my hand than it should have. Crystal, of course. Elena never settled for anything less than the best, especially when it was my money paying for it. The irony wasn't lost on me as I watched her hold court in our living room, surrounded by her sycophantic colleagues from Remington and Associates, all of them hanging on every word about her latest promotion. Marketing vice president, she announced with that practiced smile that used to make my heart skip. Now it just made my stomach turn. It's been a long road, but I finally made it to the executive floor. The applause was polite, predictable. I stayed in the corner, nursing my drink and watching the performance. Elena had always been good at performances. Of course, I couldn't have done it without the support of my wonderful husband, Lucas. Her voice carried that particular tone, the one she reserved for discussing things that embarrassed her, like me. All eyes turned my way. I raised my glass in a mock salute, saying nothing. What was there to say? That I'd been carrying the mortgage while she climbed her corporate ladder? That my carpentry business had funded her MBA? That I'd been the one holding down the fort while she worked late nights that were apparently getting later and more frequent? Lucas is so modest, Elena continued, and I could hear the subtle shift in her voice. The knife was coming out. No college degree, no corporate ambitions. He's perfectly content with his little woodworking projects and letting me handle the real world. The laughter that followed was like ice water in my veins. Polite, condescending, dismissive. These people didn't know me. Didn't know that I'd built half the custom cabinetry in their expensive homes. Didn't know I could read a blueprint faster than most of them could read a quarterly report. To them, I was just Elena's blue-collar husband, the dead weight she dragged around. But that's what I love about him, she said, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. He's so uncomplicated. I set down my champagne flute on the mantel I'd hand-carved myself. The room went quiet, sensing something in my movement. Elena's eyes met mine across the crowded space, and for just a moment, I saw a flicker of uncertainty there. Well, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the sudden silence, this has been educational, really. I've learned so much about myself tonight. I looked around the room, meeting each pair of eyes in turn, and about all of you. I started toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Elena? Congratulations on the promotion. I'm sure you earned it. The emphasis on earned was subtle but unmistakable. This is the last time any of you will see me at one of these charming gatherings. The silence followed me as I walked out, but I caught the whispered conversation between Elena and her best friend Monica just before the door closed. He'll be out of your hair soon, Monica was saying. Miles is ready to make it official. Miles Remington. Elena's boss, the silver-haired CEO with his Italian suits and his penthouse downtown. Suddenly, those late nights made perfect sense. I stood on my own front porch, the porch I'd rebuilt with my own hands, and felt something cold and calculating settle in my chest. So that's how it was going to be. Elena thought she could trade up, and she thought I'd just quietly disappear into the background. Funny thing about being underestimated your whole life, people never see you coming. I walked around to my workshop in the converted garage, flipping on the lights to illuminate my sanctuary. Hand tools hung in perfect order on pegboard walls. Power tools stood ready on custom-built benches. And in the corner sat my computer. Not the latest model, but more than adequate for research. Elena always assumed I was just playing with wood out here. She never bothered to learn what I was really capable of. The first thing I needed was information, and I knew exactly where to start. Elena was careful, but she wasn't perfect. 3 months ago, she'd asked me to fix her jewelry box, a delicate antique that required precision work. While I had it apart, I had noticed she'd started keeping things in it that weren't jewelry, like a second phone. It took me 20 minutes to find it, hidden behind a false back in her walk-in closet. A cheap burner phone, the kind people buy when they don't want their activities traced. My hands were steady as I scrolled through the messages, but my heart was hammering against my ribs. The affair had been going on for 8 months, 8 months of lies, of late nights, of Elena coming home with that satisfied glow I'd foolishly attributed to career success. But it was worse than just Zex. They were planning a future together. Miles was going to leave his wife, Elena was going to leave me, and they'd already started looking at houses together. There was more. Messages about a pregnancy scare that had ended in pregnancy failure, Elena crying to Miles about how she couldn't tell me, how she wasn't sure whose baby it would have been anyway. Miles' response was clinical, cold. Better this way, clean slate for us. My hands were shaking now. I set the phone down carefully, afraid I might crush it. Elena had been carrying another man's child, or thought she was, and I'd been none the wiser. I'd even brought her soup when she'd claimed to have food poisoning, held her hair when she was sick, thinking I was being a good husband. The sound of the front door slamming echoed through the house. The party was over. I could hear Elena's heels clicking on the hardwood floors I'd installed, could hear her calling my name with that particular edge that meant she was angry. Lucas, what the hell was that performance about? I slipped the phone back into my pocket and walked into the house. Elena was standing in the living room, still in her black cocktail dress, her face flushed with anger and champagne. Performance? I kept my voice level. I thought I was pretty straightforward. You embarrassed me in front of my colleagues, in front of Miles. She caught herself, but not quickly enough. Miles? I tilted my head. Why would you care specifically what Miles thinks? Her recovery was smooth, I had to give her that. He's my boss, Lucas. My career depends on making a good impression. Right, your career. I moved to the bar cart, another piece I'd built myself, and poured 2 fingers of bourbon. Congratulations again, by the way. VP is a big step up. I'm sure it required a lot of hard work. Something in my tone made her eyes narrow. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing at all. I'm proud of you, Elena. Really. You've worked so hard for this. I raised my glass in another mock toast. To getting what you deserve. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her trying to read my expression. But I'd learned a thing or two about performances myself over the years. I'm going to bed, she said finally. Try not to sulk all night. I waited until I heard her bedroom door close, our bedroom door, though I'd been sleeping in the guest room for weeks now. Elena assumed it was because of some midlife crisis, some wounded male ego that couldn't handle her success. She had no idea I'd been planning. Back in my workshop, I opened my laptop and started researching. Miles Remington had built his marketing empire on aggressive tactics and questionable ethics, but he'd been careful to keep his public image clean. A devoted family man, generous philanthropist, pillar of the community. The kind of man who could afford to keep secrets. But everyone had weaknesses. Everyone had pressure points. I worked until dawn, cross-referencing public records, business filings, social media posts. By the time the sun came up, I had a clearer picture of Miles Remington, and more importantly, of the cracks in his perfect facade. Elena found me at the kitchen table, still in yesterday's clothes, surrounded by printed documents and empty coffee cups. You look terrible, she said, not unkindly. For a moment, she almost sounded like the woman I'd married. Did you sleep at all? Couldn't sleep. Too much on my mind. I looked up at her, taking in her silk robe, her perfectly styled hair, the way she moved through the kitchen like she owned it, which, legally speaking, she did. The house was in her name, bought with her credit, her income. I was just the hired help who happened to share her bed. Lucas? She sat down across from me, her expression softening. About last night, maybe I was a little harsh. A little? Okay, I was harsh. But you have to understand the pressure I'm under. Like, this promotion is everything I've worked for, and I need to project strength, confidence, and I make you look weak. She didn't deny it, which was answer enough. What if I told you I was thinking of making some changes? I kept my voice casual, shuffling through the papers in front of me. Maybe it's time for me to step up my game. Her eyes sharpened with interest. What kind of changes? Business expansion. I've been getting inquiries from some high-end clients. Custom work, restoration projects. The kind of thing that could be very profitable. It wasn't entirely a lie. I had been getting inquiries, though I'd been turning them down to focus on Elena's needs. But she didn't need to know that. That's wonderful, Lucas. I think that's exactly what you need. A real business, not just a hobby. The condescension in her voice made my jaw clench, but I kept my expression neutral. I'm glad you approve, she leaned forward, reaching for my hand. We could be a real power couple, you know? Both of us successful, both of us contributing. I let her take my hand, felt her squeeze my fingers, her engagement ring, the ring I'd saved for months to buy, caught the morning light. Elena, I said quietly, there's something I need to ask you. What? Are you happy? I mean, really happy, with us, with this life we've built? The question seemed to catch her off guard. She was quiet for a long moment, her thumb tracing over my knuckles. I think, she said finally, that happiness is overrated. I think success matters more. Security matters more. And love? Another pause. Love is a luxury, Lucas. It's something you can afford when everything else is taken care of. I nodded slowly, filing that answer away with all the others. That's very practical of you. Someone has to be practical in this relationship. She kissed my forehead before she left for work, a gesture that might have meant something a year ago. Now, it just felt like a benediction before an execution. I spent the morning making phone calls. The first was to Owen Blackwood, an old friend who'd left the police force to become a private investigator. Owen specialized in what he called gray area work. Not quite legal, not quite illegal, but always effective. Lucas Moreau. Owen's gravelly voice came through the phone. Been a while, brother. What can I do for you? I need information on someone, discreetly. When do I ever work any other way? Who's the target? Miles Remington, CEO of Remington and Associates. Owen whistled low. That's a big fish. What's your interest? He's screwing my wife. There was a pause. Ah, that kind of information. This is going to cost you. Money's not an issue. It's not about money, Lucas. It's about what you're planning to do with what I find. I don't want to be an accessory to homicide. No homicide, no violence. I just want to level the playing field. Fair enough. Give me a week. My second call was to Grace Martinez, who tended bar at the Rusty Buckle, a dive on the edge of town that catered to construction workers and other blue-collar types. Grace had been serving drinks for 20 years, and in a town like Ashwood, bartenders knew everything. Grace, it's Lucas Moreau. Well, haven't seen you in here for a while. Too good for us working folk now that you married up? Something like that. Listen, I need a favor. I'm listening. You hear things about the country club crowd, the executive types. I need to know what people are saying about Miles Remington. Grace was quiet for a moment. That's a dangerous question, Lucas. What's your angle? Let's just say I'm considering a career change. Into what? Corporate espionage? Into evening the score. Grace laughed, to sound like gravel in a cement mixer. Now that sounds more interesting. Come by tonight. Bring cash. I spent the afternoon in my workshop, but I wasn't working on any carpentry projects. Instead, I was planning. Elena thought she could discard me like a broken tool, but she'd forgotten one important thing. I knew how to fix broken things, and I knew how to break things that needed fixing. The house felt different when she came home that evening. Elena was practically glowing, chattering about her day, about the new responsibilities that came with her promotion. She'd stopped at the expensive wine shop, bought a bottle of champagne to celebrate. I thought we could have a quiet dinner, she said, already opening the bottle. Just the two of us, like old times. Like old times. When had we ever had quiet dinners? Elena was always working, always networking, always climbing. But I played along, accepting the glass of champagne, listening to her talk about her plans for restructuring her department. Miles thinks I have real executive potential, she said, and I had to admire her nerve. He's talking about grooming me for even bigger things. I bet he is. If she heard the edge in my voice, she didn't show it. Elena was good at hearing only what she wanted to hear. After dinner, she suggested we watch a movie. Another throwback to better times, though I couldn't remember the last time we'd actually finished a movie together. Usually, Elena would get distracted by her phone, by emails, by the constant demands of her career. Tonight was different. She curled up next to me on the couch, her head on my shoulder, her hand resting on my chest. For a moment, I almost forgot about the burner phone, about the messages, about Miles Remington and his plans for a clean slate. Lucas, she said softly, I know things have been difficult between us lately. Have they? Don't be obtuse. You know they have. She tilted her head to look at me. But I want to work on us. I want to try. The words should have meant something. A month ago, they would have meant everything. But now, with the weight of her betrayal sitting heavy in my chest, they just sounded like another performance. What brought this on? The promotion, I guess. It's made me realize what's important. Success doesn't mean much if you don't have someone to share it with. And you want to share it with me? Of course, you're my husband. I kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her expensive shampoo. That's good to know. We made love that night for the first time in months. Elena was passionate, desperate almost, clinging to me like she was afraid I might disappear. Afterwards, she fell asleep in my arms, her breathing soft and even against my chest. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, thinking about second chances and clean slates, thinking about the messages on her phone, about Miles Remington's cold response to her pregnancy failure, about 8 months of lies and betrayal. Elena stirred in her sleep, murmuring something I couldn't make out. In the darkness, she looked younger, more vulnerable. This was the woman I'd married, the woman I'd loved. But that woman was gone, replaced by someone who saw love as a luxury and marriage as a business arrangement. I slipped out of bed carefully, not wanting to wake her. In my workshop, I opened the laptop and continued my research. Miles Remington had made a lot of enemies over the years. Competitors he'd crushed, employees he'd discarded, business partners he'd betrayed. The man had built his empire on the bodies of people who'd trusted him, just like Elena was trying to build her future on the ruins of our marriage. By morning, I had the beginnings of a plan. The rusty buckle hadn't changed in 20 years. Same scarred wooden bar, same neon beer signs, same smell of cigarettes and disappointment. Grace was behind the bar, her gray hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, her weathered face skeptical as I walked in. "You look like crap, Moreau." "Thanks. You always know just what to say." She poured me a bourbon without asking. "So, what's this about Miles Remington?" I slid a $100 bill across the bar. "What do you know about his personal life?" Grace palmed the money with practiced ease. "I know he's got expensive taste in women, and I know his wife ain't the only one he's been sampling." "Go on. Your wife ain't his first affair, Lucas. Won't be his last, either. Man's got a pattern. Finds some ambitious young thing, promises her the world, keeps her around until he gets bored or she gets inconvenient. What happens then? Then he finds a reason to get rid of her. Usually involves some kind of professional humiliation. Missed deadlines, budget overruns, performance issues. Amazing how these women suddenly become incompetent right around the time Remington moves on to his next conquest. The bourbon burned going down, but not as much as the realization that Elena was just another mark in Miles Remington's long con. "There's more," Grace continued. "Remington's got a gambling problem. High-stakes poker games, private clubs. Word is, he's been dipping into company funds to cover his losses." "How much?" "Enough to matter. Enough to bring down his whole empire if the wrong people found out." I finished my drink and stood up. "Grace, you've been very helpful." "Lucas," her voice stopped me at the door. "Whatever you're planning, be careful. Men like Remington don't go down easy, and they don't go down alone." I drove home through the winding streets of Ashwood, past the manicured lawns and expensive cars, past the country club where Elena and her colleagues played their games of status and ambition. These people thought they were untouchable, protected by their money and their connections. They were about to learn otherwise. Elena was in her home office when I got back, surrounded by papers and laptop computers, already diving into her new responsibilities. She looked up when I knocked on the doorframe. "How was your morning?" "Productive. I had a meeting with a potential client." "Anyone I know?" "I doubt it, blue-collar type. Wants some custom cabinets for his workshop." She nodded absently, already turning back to her work. "That's nice, honey." I watched her for a moment, taking in the way she'd transformed the spare bedroom into her personal command center. Awards and certificates covered one wall, a testament to her climb up the corporate ladder. Her desk was a monument to efficiency, everything organized and labeled. It was going to look very different when I was done with it. That afternoon, I drove to the hardware store and bought supplies. Nothing suspicious. Nothing that would raise questions. Just the kind of materials any contractor might need for a routine job. The clerk who rang me up was a kid I'd known since he was in diapers, son of one of my subcontractors. "Big project, Mr. Moreau?" "Something like that, Tommy, something like that." I spent the rest of the day in my workshop preparing. Elena came home late, as usual, full of stories about her first day as a VP. She'd had lunch with Miles, she said. He'd given her some advice about managing her new team. He's really taken me under his wing, she said over dinner. I'm so lucky to have a mentor like him. Lucky, I agreed. That's definitely one way to put it. After she went to bed, I got to work. The beauty of being married to someone for 5 years is that you know their habits, their routines, their blind spots. Elena was a heavy sleeper, especially when she'd had wine with dinner, and she'd had quite a bit of wine. Her home office was on the first floor, separated from the rest of the house by solid oak doors I'd installed myself. The room had its own ventilation system, its own electrical panel, very convenient for what I'd planned. I started with the electrical. A few strategic cuts, some careful rewiring, and Elena's office would experience what investigators would later determine was an unfortunate power surge. The kind of thing that happened in old houses, especially ones with custom electrical work done by unlicensed contractors. Next came the accelerant. Nothing exotic, nothing that would show up in an arson investigation. Just some wood stain and cleaning solvents. The kind of thing any home office might contain. Accidentally spilled, of course. These things happened. The fire started small, contained to Elena's desk area. Her computer, her files, her precious awards and certificates, all of it went up in flames that danced like demons in the darkness. I watched from the doorway for exactly 30 seconds, long enough to make sure it would spread properly. Then I activated the smoke alarms and started shouting. Elena stumbled out of bed, disoriented and panicked. What's happening? Lucas, what's happening? Fire, call 911. The next hour was chaos. Fire trucks, paramedics, neighbors gathering on the lawn to watch the show. Elena stood in her bathrobe, tears streaming down her face as she watched her office burn. The firefighters contained the blaze quickly, but the damage was done. Everything she'd worked for, all her professional achievements, reduced to ash and smoke. How did this happen? She kept asking. How did this happen? The fire marshal was a competent man named Peterson, someone I'd worked with on various construction projects over the years. He examined the scene with professional thoroughness, taking pictures, making notes. Electrical fire, he concluded. Looks like a power surge, probably caused by some kind of wiring issue. These old houses, you know. Sometimes the electrical can't handle modern equipment loads. Elena looked at me with accusation in her eyes. You did the wiring in that room. I installed some outlets. I said carefully, but the main electrical work was done by licensed contractors. You insisted on that, remember? She did remember. Elena had been very specific about using certified professionals for anything that might affect the house's resale value. The irony wasn't lost on me. The insurance adjuster came the next day, a thorough man who asked a lot of questions and took even more pictures. Elena hovered over him like a nervous bird, explaining the importance of the documents that had been destroyed, the irreplaceable nature of her awards and certificates. Do you have digital copies of any of this material? The adjuster asked. Some of it, but not everything. Some of those awards were one of a kind. I understand. Unfortunately, personal achievement awards aren't typically covered under standard homeowners' policies. We can cover the office equipment, the furniture, but the sentimental items. Elena's face went white. But those awards represent years of work. They're proof of my accomplishments. I'm sure they were very meaningful to you, Mrs. Moreau. But from an insurance standpoint, they don't have quantifiable replacement value. I put my arm around Elena's shoulders, offering comfort I didn't feel. It's okay, honey. You can get copies of most of this stuff from your company's HR department. She shrugged away from me. It's not the same, Lucas. It's not the same at all. No, it wasn't the same, and that was exactly the point. Elena threw herself into rebuilding her records, spending hours on the phone with former employers, professional organizations, anyone who might have copies of her achievements. It was exhausting work, made more difficult by the fact that some of the organizations had changed hands over the years. Some had gone out of business entirely. Meanwhile, I was conducting my own research. Owen had come through with a thick file on Miles Remington, filled with the kind of information that could end careers and destroy reputations. Financial irregularities, questionable business practices, a pattern of sexual maltreatment that had been quietly settled out of court. This guy's a walking lawsuit, Owen said when he delivered the file. How has he stayed in business this long? Money and connections. The usual armor of the privileged class. What are you planning to do with this? I flipped through the pages, absorbing the details of Miles Remington's carefully hidden sins. I'm going to give him a taste of his own medicine. Be careful, Lucas. Men like this have resources. They fight back. Let him fight. I'm not the same man I was a month ago. That evening, Elena came home in a fury. Someone's been spreading rumors about me at work. What kind of rumors? About us, about our marriage. Monica heard from someone in accounting that people are saying we're having problems, that I'm distracted, that my personal life is affecting my professional performance. I looked up from my newspaper, keeping my expression neutral. Where would they get an idea like that? I don't know, but it's affecting how people see me. Miles had to defend me in a partners meeting today. That was good of him. It shouldn't have been necessary. Elena paced the living room like a caged animal. I've worked too hard to let gossip destroy my reputation. Maybe you should be more careful about appearances. She stopped pacing and stared at me. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. Just that in a small town like Ashwood, people notice things. They talk. What do they have to talk about? I folded my newspaper and looked at her directly. You tell me, Elena. For a moment, I thought she might confess. I could see the guilt flickering in her eyes, the weight of her secrets pressing down on her. But Elena had always been stronger than her conscience. I don't have time for paranoid speculation, she said finally. I have work to do. She locked herself in the guest bedroom, her temporary office, and I didn't see her again until morning. But I could hear her on the phone, her voice rising and falling as she tried to manage the crisis that was slowly engulfing her professional life. The rumors were my doing, of course, a few carefully placed words in the right ears, some strategic gossip delivered through Grace's network of bartenders and service workers. In a town like Ashwood, information flowed through the working class like water through a sieve. A waitress at the country club overhears a conversation, mentions it to her sister who works at the bank, who mentions it to her husband, who does landscaping for one of Elena's colleagues. By the time the story made its way back to Remington and Associates, it had grown and mutated, become something far more damaging than the simple truth. Elena wasn't just having marital problems. She was unstable, distracted, possibly having a breakdown. The kind of person you couldn't trust with major accounts or important clients. Miles called an emergency meeting with Elena, ostensibly to discuss damage control. I knew about the meeting because I'd been monitoring Elena's email, another skill she'd underestimated in her blue-collar husband. The meeting was scheduled for Saturday afternoon at Miles' penthouse downtown. I arrived early and positioned myself in the coffee shop across the street with a clear view of the building's entrance. Elena showed up precisely on time, dressed in her best power suit, carrying a briefcase full of documents meant to prove her competence and stability. She stayed for 3 hours. When she finally emerged, her composure had cracked. Even from across the street, I could see the tears on her face, the defeated slump of her shoulders. Miles had thrown her to the wolves just like he'd done to all the others. Elena drove home like a woman in a trance. I beat her there by taking back roads, was sitting in my workshop when I heard her car in the driveway. She didn't come looking for me, didn't call out a greeting. I heard her go straight to her makeshift office and close the door. An hour later, I heard her crying. I found her curled up on the guest bed, still in her business suit, clutching a pillow like a lifeline. Her makeup had run, leaving dark streaks down her cheeks. For a moment, she looked like the young woman I'd married, vulnerable and human. Elena, what happened? She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. They're transferring me. What? Miles says it's temporary, just until the rumors die down. But I know what it really is. She sat up, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. It's exile. They're moving me to the Hartford office, away from the main accounts, away from everything I've built. I sat down on the edge of the bed. I'm sorry. Are you? Her voice was sharp, accusatory. Are you really sorry, Lucas? Or are you glad to see me brought down to your level? The question hung in the air between us. I could have lied, could have offered false comfort and empty reassurances. Instead, I told her the truth. I'm sorry you're hurt, I said, but I'm not sorry you're learning what it feels like to be discarded by people you trusted. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see understanding dawning in her eyes. You know. I know. How long have you known?
Long enough. Elena closed her eyes, her shoulders sagging with the weight of her exposed secrets. Lucas, I can explain. Can you? Can you explain 8 months of lies? Can you explain screwing your boss while I was home making dinner and doing laundry? Can you explain planning a future with another man while sleeping in my bed? She flinched at each question like I was striking her. It wasn't supposed to happen this way. How was it supposed to happen, Elena?
Were you going to ask for a divorce? Or were you just going to disappear one day with a note on the kitchen table? I was going to tell you. After the promotion was secure, after Miles left his wife, we were going to do it right. Right, I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. There's a right way to destroy a marriage. Our marriage was already over, Lucas. We both knew it. We've been living like roommates for months. I didn't know it. I thought we were going through a rough patch. I thought we could work it out. Elena looked at me with something that might have been pity. You always were naive. The word hit me like a slap. Naive. That's what she thought of me, what she'd probably always thought. The simple carpenter who couldn't see what was happening right in front of him. Maybe I was naive, I said, standing up, but I'm a quick learner. I left her there and went back to my workshop. There was work to do, and Elena's tears weren't going to stop me from doing it. The next phase of my plan required more direct action. Miles Remington drove a silver BMW, a beautiful machine that he parked in the executive garage beneath his building. The garage was secured, of course, but security was designed to keep out car thieves and vandals, not someone with legitimate construction access. I'd done work in that building 2 years ago, installing custom millwork in the lobby. The security guard, a retired cop named Martinez, remembered me well enough to wave me through when I showed up Monday morning in my work truck, carrying a toolbox and wearing a contractor's badge I'd never bothered to return. Working on the Jameson renovation? Martinez asked. Something like that, I replied, and he went back to his newspaper. Miles's BMW was parked in its reserved spot, gleaming under the fluorescent lights. I worked quickly and quietly, using skills I'd learned in a different life. Before Elena, before marriage, before I'd convinced myself that being respectable was more important than being effective. The paint job was my masterpiece. Bright red letters across the windshield, home wrecker. More red paint on the hood, spelling out words that would make Miles's country club friends very uncomfortable. I slashed 2 tires for good measure, then filled the interior with sawdust from my workshop. The final touch was a note tucked under the windshield wiper. Looks like your ride's as reliable as your morals. A concerned citizen. I was back in my truck and out of the garage before Martinez looked up from his crossword puzzle. Miles discovered the vandalism that evening. I knew because Elena's phone, her real phone this time, rang at 8:30 and I could hear Miles' voice through the speaker, high-pitched with rage and panic. Someone destroyed my car, Elena. Someone who knows about us. What do you mean destroyed? Painted, slashed, ruined. And there was a note. Someone knows, Elena. Someone knows everything. I listened from the kitchen as Elena tried to calm him down, tried to convince him it was probably just random vandalism. But Miles wasn't buying it. This is connected to those rumors at the office. Someone's targeting us, Elena. Someone's trying to destroy us. Who would do that? I don't know, but I'm going to find out. And when I do, they're going to regret it. After Elena hung up, she came looking for me. I was in the living room, reading a book, the picture of domestic tranquility. Lucas, we need to talk. About what? About Miles's car, about what happened today. I looked up from my book. Something happened to Miles' car? That's terrible. What kind of thing? Elena studied my face, looking for tells, for some sign that I was lying. But I'd had weeks to practice my poker face. Someone vandalized it, painted obscenities, slashed the tires. In broad daylight? That's bold. Did he call the police? I don't think so. Why not? If someone damaged my car, I'd definitely call the police. Elena didn't have an answer for that, probably because she knew exactly why Miles couldn't involve the authorities. A police report would be public record, and public records had a way of finding their way to wives and business partners. Lucas, she said carefully, if you knew something about this, you'd tell me, right? Elena, I replied, matching her tone, if you knew something about why someone might want to hurt Miles Remington, you'd tell me, right? We stared at each other across the living room, 2 players in a game that was
rapidly escalating beyond either of our original intentions. I don't know what you're talking about, she said finally. Neither do I. But we both knew we were lying. The next morning brought a new development. Elena's phone rang at 6 a.m., jolting us both awake. It was Monica, calling with news that sent Elena into a panic. The partners want to see you, Monica said, her voice tight with worry. All of them, this morning. What about? I don't know, but Miles looks like he's been hit by a truck. Something big is happening, Elena. Something by it. After Elena left for work, I called Owen. Did you send that package to the Remington and Associates Board of Directors? Delivered yesterday afternoon. Financial records, gambling debts, maltreatment settlements, the whole ugly picture. They should be having a very interesting partners meeting right about now. What do you think they'll do? If they're smart, cut them loose before the scandal spreads. Remington's made them a lot of money over the years, but not enough to risk their own reputations. Owen was right. Elena came home that afternoon looking like she'd witnessed an execution. They fired him, she said, collapsing into a chair. Miles is gone, effective immediately. What happened? I don't know. Something about financial irregularities, about investigations, about protecting the firm's reputation. They wouldn't give details, just said that Miles Remington was no longer associated with the company and that anyone who had worked closely with him would be under scrutiny, including you, including me. Elena looked up at me with haunted eyes. Lucas, I think I'm going to lose my job. Why? You didn't do anything wrong. The lie came easily, but Elena caught it immediately. Didn't I? We both know I did plenty wrong. That evening, Elena's burner phone rang. Miles calling from what sounded like a bar, drunk and desperate. They destroyed me, Elena. Someone fed them information, financial records, things that were supposed to be private. This isn't random. This is personal. Miles, you're scaring me. Good. You should be scared. Because whoever did this to me, they're not done. You're next, Elena. You have to know that. What are you talking about? Think about it. Who knows about us? Who has access to both of our lives? Who would want to see us both destroyed? I could hear Elena's breathing change, could practically feel her realization through the phone. No, she whispered. He wouldn't. He couldn't. Couldn't he? Your husband's not the simple carpenter you think he is, Elena. I did some checking after my car got vandalized. Lucas Moreau has some interesting skills, some interesting connections. Did you know he used to work private security? Did you know he has friends in law enforcement? Elena's eyes found mine across the room. I was still reading my book, still The Picture of Innocence, but she wasn't buying it anymore. I have to go, she said, and hung up. That sounded like an interesting conversation. Elena stood up slowly like an old woman with arthritis. It was Miles. How's he doing? I heard he had some employment difficulties. Lucas, stop. Just stop pretending. I know it was you. I closed my book and looked at her directly. You know what was me? All of it. The rumors, the vandalism, whatever information destroyed Miles' career. It was you. That's a serious accusation, Elena. Do you have any proof? I don't need proof. I know you. Do you? Because a few weeks ago, you seemed to think I was just a naive carpenter who couldn't see past his own nose. Elena sank back into her chair, the fight going out of her. What do you want, Lucas? Money? The house? What's it going to take to end this? End what? I'm not doing anything to you, Elena. I'm just watching you reap what you've sown. That's not true. You're orchestrating this, manipulating things, destroying people's lives. The way you destroyed our marriage? Our marriage was already dead. Was it, or did you just decide it wasn't profitable enough for your ambitions? Elena started crying again, but this time the tears felt calculated, performed. Lucas, please, I know I hurt you. I know I made mistakes, but this has gone too far. Has it? Because from where I'm sitting, we're just getting started. The next few days passed in tense silence. Elena went to work each morning, but I could tell the walls were closing in on her. Her colleagues avoided her. Her phone stopped ringing. Her confident stride became a nervous shuffle. Meanwhile, I was making new friends. Grace had introduced me to her network of service workers, the people who cleaned offices and served drinks and overheard conversations. In a town like Ashwood, these invisible people knew everything about everyone. Elena Moreau's been asking questions, Grace told me over a beer at the Rusty Buckle, trying to figure out who's been spreading stories about her. Any luck? She's barking up the wrong tree. Thinks it's someone at her office. Someone with a grudge. Never occurred to her it might be someone closer to home. People see what they expect to see. Speaking of which, your wife's been spending a lot of time at that fancy hotel downtown. The Ashwood Grand usually shows up around lunchtime, leaves a couple hours later. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Alone? Not hardly. She's been meeting with some lawyer type. Expensive suit, briefcase, the whole 9 yards. Elena was planning her exit strategy. Probably filing for divorce, trying to figure out how to minimize the financial damage, maybe even exploring legal options against me. The thought should have worried me, but instead it just made me angry. She was still trying to control the narrative, still trying to come out on top. That night I confronted her. Planning a trip, Elena? She looked up from her laptop, her expression carefully neutral. What do you mean? Grace Martinez says you've been spending time at the Ashwood Grand, meeting with lawyers. Elena's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the calculation underneath. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you do. You're filing for divorce, trying to figure out how to screw me over one last time. Lucas, let me save you some time and legal fees, I interrupted. I don't want your money. I don't want the house. I don't want anything that belongs to you. Elena stared at me, clearly not believing what she was hearing. What do you want? I want you to understand what it feels like to lose everything you care about. I want you to know what betrayal tastes like. I want you to experience the same humiliation you put me through. And then what? What happens after you've destroyed my life? Then we're even. Elena closed her laptop and looked at me with something that might have been respect. You're not the man I married. No, I'm not. That man was weak. That man let people walk all over him. That man is gone. What if I fight back? What if I don't just roll over and let you destroy me? I smiled, and Elena actually flinched at the expression. Then things get interesting. The next morning, Elena left early for work, but she didn't go to her office. Instead, she drove to Miles Remington's penthouse downtown. I followed at a distance, curious to see what kind of alliance they might try to forge. The building's doorman knew me from previous construction work, and a $20 bill bought me access to the service elevator. I positioned myself in the hallway outside Miles' apartment, close enough to hear voices, but far enough away to avoid detection. The conversation was heated from the start. This is your fault, Miles was saying. Your husband is destroying both of us, and you're just letting it happen. What do you want me to do? I can't control Lucas? You can divorce him, take him for everything he's worth, make him hurt the way he's making us hurt. He says he doesn't want anything. The house, the money, none of it. Then what does he want? Revenge, pure and simple. There was a long pause, then Miles spoke again, his voice lower, more dangerous. Then maybe it's time we gave him something to really be angry about. What do you mean? I mean, maybe your husband needs to learn that there are consequences to screwing with people like us. I still have connections, Elena. People who owe me favors. People who know how to solve problems. Miles, no. I'm talking about survival. Your husband has declared war on us. Maybe it's time we fought back. I'd heard enough. I slipped back to the service elevator and made my way out of the building, my mind racing. Miles Remington was escalating things, moving from financial warfare to something potentially physical. It was time to escalate my own response. That afternoon, I made a phone call to Jordan Walsh, Miles's former enforcer at Remington and Associates. Jordan was a big man with small morals, the kind of person who solved problems with his fists rather than his brain. According to Owen's intelligence, Jordan had been let go when Miles was fired. But he was still loyal to his former boss. I wasn't surprised when Jordan showed up at my house that evening. I was surprised by how obvious he was about it. The man had all the subtlety of a brick through a window. He parked his black SUV directly across from my house and sat there for an hour, making no effort to hide his surveillance. When Elena came home, she noticed him immediately. Lucas, there's a strange man watching our house. I looked out the window and recognized Jordan's bulky silhouette. Huh, that's odd. Should we call the police? Let's see what he wants first. I walked outside, moving with deliberate casualness. Jordan got out of his SUV and approached me, his intentions written clearly on his brutish face. You Lucas Moreau? Depends who's asking. Someone who thinks you've been causing trouble for the wrong people. Is that so, and what kind of trouble would that be? Jordan stepped closer, trying to use his size to intimidate me. The kind of trouble that stops tonight. You're going to back off, leave Mr. Remington alone, and keep your mouth shut about things that don't concern you. Or what? or you're going to have an accident. The kind of accident that teaches people to mind their own business. I nodded thoughtfully, as if considering his proposal. That's an interesting offer, but I have a counter proposal. Yeah? What's that? You get back in your car, drive away, and tell Miles Remington that if he sends any more of his trained apes to threaten me, I'm going to make his current problems look like a minor inconvenience. Jordan laughed, a sound like gravel in a cement mixer. You got balls, I'll give you that. But balls don't stop bullets. Neither does stupidity. But you seem to be testing that theory. The big man's face darkened. You think you're smart, don't you? Think you can hide behind your tools and your clever words. But when it comes down to it, you're just another suburban pussy who's never been in a real fight. You're probably right, I said. But here's the thing about suburban pussies. We know how to use what we have. I pulled out my phone and showed Jordan the screen. It was recording our conversation. It had been since he'd approached me. Threatening to shoot someone is a felony in this state, I continued. And I've got your license plate, your face, and your voice. They're all nice and digital. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to get back in your car and leave. And if you or anyone else Miles sends comes near me or my property again, this recording goes straight to the police. Jordan stared at the phone, his small brain working through the implications. You're bluffing. Am I? You want to test that theory? The big man looked around, suddenly aware that we were standing in the middle of a residential neighborhood surrounded by houses full of potential witnesses. His swagger evaporated. This isn't over, he muttered. Yes, it is, unless you want it to get much worse. Jordan got back in his SUV and drove away, but I knew he'd be back. Men like him didn't handle humiliation well, and I just made him look like a fool in front of his employer. Elena was waiting for me inside, her face pale with fear. Lucas, what was that about? Miles is getting desperate. He's trying to scare me into backing down. Maybe you should. Maybe we should just end this before someone gets hurt. I looked at my wife, my soon-to-be ex-wife, and saw the fear in her eyes. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. She'd gotten in over her head, made a deal with a devil who was now showing his true colors. It's too late for that, Elena. Miles made this personal when he sent his goon to threaten me. Now it's a matter of survival. What are you going to do? Whatever it takes. That night, I prepared for war. My workshop had always been my sanctuary, but now it became my armory. I inventoried my tools, my supplies, my resources. Elena thought I was just a simple carpenter, but she'd never bothered to learn about my time in the army, about the skills I'd developed before I'd convinced myself that civilian life was safer, simpler. Some skills, once learned, are never forgotten. I started with home security. Motion sensors in the yard, cameras at every entrance, reinforced locks on all the doors. If Jordan or anyone else wanted to pay me another visit, they'd find me ready. Next came offensive preparations. I had no intention of waiting for Miles to make the next move. The man had declared war, and wars were won by those who struck first and struck hard. Owen arrived the next morning with additional intelligence and some specialized equipment. You sure about this, Lucas? Once you cross this line, there's no going back. Miles crossed the line when he sent Jordan to threaten me. Now, I'm just returning the favor. Owen nodded grimly. Then let's make sure you do it right. We spent the morning planning, using Owen's law enforcement experience and my technical skills to devise a strategy that would neutralize Miles Remington once and for all. It wasn't going to be pretty, and it wasn't going to be legal, but it was going to be effective. Elena left for work as usual, but I could tell she was rattled. She kept looking over her shoulder, jumping at every unexpected sound. The comfortable world she'd built for herself was crumbling, and she didn't know how to stop it. Good. Fear was a teacher, and Elena had some hard lessons coming. That afternoon, I put the first phase of my plan into action. Miles Remington might have lost his job, but he still had his reputation, his social standing, his membership in Ashwood's exclusive country club. These things mattered to a man like him, were part of his identity. It was time to take them away. The country club's annual charity gala was that weekend, a black tie affair that drew the cream of Ashwood society. Miles would be there, of course. He was on the organizing committee, had been for years. It was his chance to show the community that his recent employment difficulties were just a temporary setback. I had different plans for the evening. Grace's network had provided me with detailed information about the event. The guest list, the seating arrangements, the schedule of activities. More importantly, they'd given me access. One of Grace's contacts was working the catering service, and for a modest fee, she was willing to let me borrow a server's uniform. Saturday evening found me in a white jacket and black bow tie, carrying a tray of champagne glasses through the country club's opulent ballroom. The wealthy elite of Ashwood mingled and networked, blissfully unaware that their social hierarchy was about to be demolished. Miles was holding court near the bar, surrounded by sycophants and social climbers. He looked older than he had a month ago, the stress of his recent troubles etched in the lines around his eyes. But he was still playing the role of the successful executive, still pretending that his world hadn't collapsed. Elena was there too, stunning in a black evening gown, playing the part of the supportive wife even though everyone knew our marriage was over. She was working the room with practiced efficiency, trying to salvage what remained of her social standing. I waited until the evening's formal program began, until Miles took the stage to deliver his remarks as the gala's honorary chairman. He spoke about community, about responsibility, about the importance of maintaining Ashwood's values and traditions. It was the perfect setup for what came next. The video began playing on the ballroom's large screens just as Miles was reaching the climax of his speech. Security footage from his office building, showing him in compromising positions with various female employees over the years. Audio recordings of him promising promotions in exchange for sexual favors. Financial documents showing his gambling debts and the company funds he'd embezzled to cover them. The ballroom erupted in chaos. Miles stopped speaking, his face going white as he stared at the screens. Elena gasped audibly, her champagne glass slipping from nerveless fingers to shatter on the marble floor. But the show wasn't over yet. The final video was the most damaging. Security footage from Miles's penthouse, showing him and Elena together, making their plans to destroy our marriage and my reputation. The audio was crystal clear, every word a nail in both of their social coffins. "The husband's too stupid to figure it out," Miles' voice echoed through the ballroom. "And we just need to be patient until I can get rid of my wife and Elena can dump her loser carpenter." Elena's voice responded, "I can't wait to be free of him. Lucas is such a pathetic little man. No ambition, no vision, no future." The ballroom was dead silent now. Hundreds of pairs of eyes turning to stare at Elena and Miles. The cream of Ashwood society, confronted with the ugly truth about two of their most prominent members. Miles tried to recover and grabbing the microphone with shaking hands. "This is fake, doctored. Someone is trying to destroy me with lies and fabricated evidence." But his protests fell on deaf ears. The evidence was too comprehensive, too detailed, too obviously authentic. And in a community like Ashwood, reputation was everything. Once lost, it could never be fully recovered. I slipped out of the ballroom during the chaos that followed, discarding my server's uniform in a bathroom and changing back into my civilian clothes. By the time security thought to check the catering staff, I was long gone. The fallout from the gala was immediate and devastating. The story spread through Ashwood like wildfire, fueled by social media and the town's notorious gossip network. By Sunday morning, everyone knew about Miles Remington's crimes and Elena's betrayal. Elena came home that night looking like she'd been hit by a truck. Her carefully applied makeup was streaked with tears, her elegant gown wrinkled and stained. She found me in my workshop, calmly sanding a piece of oak. "You destroyed us," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I revealed you. There's a difference. No one will ever trust me again. My career is over. My reputation is ruined. Now you know how it feels." Elena sank into a chair, all the fight gone out of her. "What happens now?" "Now you live with the consequences of your choices." "And Miles?" "Miles made his own bed. Let him lie in it." Elena was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. When she spoke again, her voice was different, smaller, more vulnerable. "I loved you once, in the beginning." "I know. When did it all go wrong?" I stopped sanding and looked at her directly. "When you decided that love was a luxury you couldn't afford." She nodded slowly, accepting the truth of it. "I'm going to leave Ashwood, start over somewhere else. That's probably wise. Will you be able to forgive me? Someday?" I considered the question, weighing the years of marriage against the months of betrayal, the good memories against the bitter reality. "I'll be able to forget you," I said finally. "That's the best I can offer." Elena left the next morning, taking only what she could fit in her car. She didn't say goodbye, didn't leave a note. One moment she was there, and the next she was gone, like she'd never existed at all. But Miles Remington wasn't finished. The man had lost everything, his job, his reputation, his social standing, but he still had his anger. And angry men do stupid things. He came for me on a Tuesday night, 3 days after Elena had left town. I was expecting him, had been expecting him since the country club disaster. Men like Miles don't accept defeat gracefully. He brought Jordan with him, and two other men I didn't recognize. They came prepared for violence, carrying baseball bats and wearing dark clothing. They thought they were hunters, stalking easy prey. They were wrong. I'd spent the previous days preparing for their visit. Motion sensors alerted me when they entered my property, hidden cameras tracked their movements, and remote-controlled devices channeled them exactly where I wanted them to go. They made it as far as my workshop before the lights came on, and they found themselves surrounded. Not by police or security guards, but by me and Owen and three of his former colleagues from the police force. "Evening, Miles," I said conversationally. "Lovely night for a home invasion." Miles looked around wildly, his carefully laid plans crumbling in the face of superior preparation. "You can't prove anything. We were just what? Taking a midnight stroll through my workshop with baseball bats? That's an interesting hobby." Jordan started to raise his bat, but found himself staring down the barrel of Owen's service weapon. "I wouldn't," Owen said calmly. "Trespassing, breaking and entering, an attack with a deadly weapon. You're already looking at serious time. Don't make it worse." "This is a setup," Miles snarled. "You lured us here." "Did I? How exactly did I lure you into committing multiple felonies on my property?" Miles had no answer for that. Probably because there was no good answer. He'd let his rage override his judgment, and now he was paying the price. "Here's what's going to happen," I continued. "You're going to leave my property and never come back. You're going to leave Ashwood and never return. And if I ever see you again, if you ever threaten me or anyone I care about, I'm going to make tonight's humiliation look like a minor embarrassment. You can't make me leave town, can't I?" I pulled out my phone and showed him the screen. "I've got video of you and your friends breaking into my property with weapons. I've got audio of you threatening me. I've got enough evidence to put you away for years." Miles stared at the phone, his face cycling through anger, fear, and finally defeat. "What do you want?" "I want you gone, permanently. Take your friends, take your threats, and disappear. And if I don't, then you'll find out just how creative I can be when people threaten my peace of mind." Miles looked around at the faces surrounding him, seeing no sympathy, no mercy, no way out. His shoulders sagged as the last of his arrogance drained away. "This isn't over," he said, but the words lacked conviction. "Yes, it is, unless you want it to get much, much worse." Miles and his companions left without another word, slinking away into the darkness like the cowards they'd always been. I never saw any of them again. The next morning brought a sense of peace I hadn't felt in months. The house was quiet, the threats were neutralized, and my enemies were scattered to the winds. Elena was gone, Miles was gone, and I was free to rebuild my life on my own terms. I spent the day in my workshop, not planning revenge or preparing for war, but simply working with wood, creating something beautiful from raw materials, using skills that had sustained me long before Elena and would sustain me long after. Grace stopped by that evening with a bottle of bourbon and a satisfied smile. "Heard Miles Remington left town this morning," she said, settling into a chair. "Packed up his penthouse and drove off without a word to anyone." "Is that so?" "Word is he's heading to California. Fresh start, new opportunities, all that bullcrap." "Good for him." Grace poured 2 glasses of bourbon and handed me one. "So, what's next for Lucas Moreau?" I considered the question, looking around at my workshop, my tools, my sanctuary. "I'm thinking of expanding the business, taking on some of those high-end projects I've been turning down." "Sounds like a plan." "And Elena?" "Elena who?" Grace laughed and raised her glass. "To new beginnings. To new beginnings." We drank in comfortable silence, 2 survivors who'd weathered the storm and come out stronger. Outside, Ashwood settled into its evening routine, the gossips and social climbers and status seekers all returning to their comfortable lives. But they'd learned something important over the past few weeks. They'd learned that even the most powerful people could fall, that even the most careful plans could be destroyed, that even the most dismissed and underestimated person could fight back. They'd learned that Lucas Moreau was not a man to be trifled with, and that lesson would serve them well in the years to come. 3 months later, I received a postcard from somewhere in Arizona. No return address, no signature, just a desert landscape and a single line of text. You were right about everything. I threw the postcard away without a second thought. Elena belonged to my past now, and I was focused on my future. The future looked very bright indeed.